Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Welcome to another edition of Illinois Rising. I'm Dan Proft, morning drive co-host of Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, 5 to 9 a.m. Monday to Friday with Amy Jacobson. Co-hosting with me on this installment is Pat Hughes, the co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project, illinoisopportunity.org. And speaking of opportunity, the EDGE tax credit, Pat, this is a tax credit in Illinois, tax credit program that offers incentives to companies to create jobs. It's a way for Illinois to try and keep companies here and lure others to locate here. At least that's how it's sold. One of our tools in our economic development toolbox at the state level. And it was recently reauthorized with an overwhelming majority in the House. But Illinois Policy Institute and others that are not so keen on rent-seeking behavior have suggested that the tax credits provided by the EDGE tax credit program haven't really produced the sort of job creation that they've advertised. And so maybe this is just a thinly veiled corporate welfare and not a program that actually engineers economic growth and job opportunities.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, Dan, that it's even thinly veiled. Look, the only people who really qualify for this credit are sort of the larger politically connected organizations. You know, as you know, Dan, you speak about this all the time. Most people are employed by small business. So instead of having policies that are the crony capitalism of the EDGE tax credit program, why don't we instead overwhelmingly vote for policies that are going to grow the economy for everyone and help the small businesses who are the vast majority of people who are companies that employ people, and you'll lead to economic growth and more jobs.
So this is sort of a version of our export-import bank at the state level. Right, it's a benefit for the big players that don't necessarily require the benefit, or at least don't provide a return on investment for the benefit. And for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by State Representative Mark Batinick, a Republican from Plainfield, and one of the three legislators who voted against the EDGE tax credit program. Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, love being on the phone talking this issue. It was music to my ears hearing you guys talk. It's a big problem.
Well, explain the problem. I mean, since 2001, according to Illinois Policy Institute data, EDGE has spent more than $1.3 billion in tax credits. And so in the 17 years since the beginning of the decade, according to the Illinois Manufacturing Association, we've net created 100 jobs. So that seems like a pretty good return.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of coincidental. We just passed a bill last Friday that was $8 million of tax incentives for a company in the south suburbs that was going to create 40 jobs. I mean, do the math on that. That's $200,000 per job. The EDGE tax credit, even if it's working right, is like taking aspirin for cancer. We're not dealing with the root problem that we have an overall negative business climate, business regulations, everything, property taxes, work comp, everything down the way. And if you foster a positive environment for small businesses, inherently big businesses will be helped too. So we need to deal with the large issues, not these like one-off trying to bribe businesses to come here, or they hold a gun to us for us to keep them here.
But the argument that's made by proponents of the EDGE tax credit, which apparently is most of your colleagues, is, hey, look, you talk to a business that's wooed to move from Chicago Metro to Indiana, and Indiana's offering all kinds of tax incentives, and Texas is doing it too, and Tennessee. So we need this tax credit as a tool, not necessarily the whole thing, but as a tool for us to use to compete with other states that are offering similar incentives to businesses.
Well, you know, I want businesses that want to have roots here. I don't want businesses that are going to sell themselves to the lowest bidder. And when you have an overall positive environment for everybody, you'll have all those small mom and pop shops that don't leave their family, their friends, their community for some sort of tax and some sort of tax incentives that they can't get anyways. The small companies can't get the edge tax credits. So I just don't think it works. I mean, we have so many situations where we have big tax credits for companies for a certain number of years, and we're all excited when that tax credit is going to expire and we're going to start reaping more tax revenue, and they just say, well, we're going to move. Now that the tax credit's up, we're going to move. So it's not a winning formula in my mind.
Mark, over the last several years, your caucus on the Republican side has been turned over significantly, and I think for the better of the state. You've got better people in the caucus, more fiscally conservative people that are willing to fight on these issues. Why are you basically standing alone amongst your caucus members? I mean, I understand the Democrats. What is the temperature on this issue? What is being discussed, and why isn't there more support for your side of things?
I actually think there's more support than might have been seen in that vote. That vote extended the EDGE credit for a month, and I know that there's a new program that I'm not super familiar with called Thrive that's supposed to include more credits for small businesses. But, I'm not worried about the onesie-twosies. I'm worried about the thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses that don't get these tax credits, that are screaming about property taxes, that are screaming about regulations, that are screaming about we must have passed a half a dozen new regulations on small businesses last week. And those are the things that need to be undone. Those are the things that are inhibiting job growth.
Right.
Those are the things that we need to fix.
And so you have legislators operating out of fear, right? I mean, on the one hand, they're imposing costly regulations and they're making this a hostile business climate up and down the size of a particular company. And on the other, they're saying, well, if we don't pass the EDGE tax credit, this could be the last straw. And particularly our big employers that we want to keep, the marquee names in Illinois, like John Deere, Caterpillar, others, well, we can't have them relocate out of Illinois.
Yeah, here's the big problem with that whole theory, though. We always talk about the big players because they make for a big press release. As you guys know, I'm in commercial real estate, and there's no press release for the small company that just moved 6 jobs to Indiana.
Yep.
Right? 2 brothers, one lives in Naperville, one lives in Yorkville. They had a facility in Plainfield. They moved all their assembly work, their manufacturing work to Indiana. There's no press release for that company, and there's a steady stream of that's a lot more jobs than the big hitters. And that's what we're missing out on.
Well, and I mean, and to this point, I mean, look, what did Caterpillar do? Just recently, they're closing the facility in Aurora. They're moving executives from Peoria to Chicago. Now, they may still be here long term, but they're not investing in Illinois. Neither is John Deere, neither is ADM. So the big players are making some of the same decisions based on the same calculus as the smaller players. I may stay here. I may enjoy, I'm sure they're going to take the benefits the state provides if they're going to provide them, but I'm not making my long-term future in terms of profitability here because I'm telling you that by the investment decisions I make everywhere but here.
Yeah, that Caterpillar plant is actually in my district, the one that lost 1,200 manufacturing jobs. And I actually had one of the workers come in a couple of years ago, right when I took office, complaining about Rauner. And I told him specifically, I said, lower comp costs and low property taxes will help you keep your job, not hurt you. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And sure enough, a couple of years later, they're gone. And a lot of those jobs went to Arkansas. They didn't go overseas.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that Arkansas has lower property taxes. I know they have a lower work comp rate, and they probably have a better regulatory environment. But if you're Caterpillar, what are you going to do?
Yeah, Mark, and you mentioned earlier why this is, it's hard for people to get a grasp on something as esoteric as workers' comp. I think they understand property taxes because it hits them in their home and in their business every day. But the whole point of this is what you mentioned before, the press release, right? Politicians don't want to be called out by big corporations and their supporters for losing a company that's on the front page of the news when they're running for re-election every 2 years. But aside from the EDGE vote, which I think is, like you said, it might just be a temporary solution for this next month, is there any news out of Springfield on the economic front that the listeners can be optimistic about? I know there's been a lot of infighting back and forth trying to figure out something on this grand bargain, which of course I was opposed to. I know Dan was opposed to. What news is coming out of there that can give people some hope?
Well, Kyle McCarter and Dan McConkey put forth a no tax increase budget. I actually helped them with portions of that. and I've pre-filed for a lot of their bills in the House. It's a lot of changes. It's a heavy lift, but there certainly is a way out. I mean, the most frustrating thing for me that I tell people is I see all the problems. There's a way out. There's a solution. It's just whether or not we choose it. We have so many opportunities in Illinois. We have so many assets and things that other states don't have that if we were to use them properly, I mean, the state would do extremely well. So there are some people that are fighting, trying to make things happen. Unfortunately, we're not quite. We're kind of soloists right now. We haven't. It's not a choir in the General Assembly of people trying to do the right thing, but it's a small growing contingent. Is probably the best hope I could give you.
All right. He is State Representative Mark Batinick, freshman Republican from Plainfield. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.